Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar, which is on the LBS Career Centre and how the LBS Career Centre is there to help support students who are pursuing a career within finance. To quickly introduce myself, so my name is Lakfair Singh, and I'm the Student Recruitment Manager for the Masters in Finance programme. Me and the team, so the recruitment team, are there to help support and guide any prospective student who is considering applying to our programs here at LBS. In terms of the support that we offer, this is CV reviews, this is having one-to-one telephone chats, where we're there to kind of look at your profiles and give you some more advice and support in terms of finding out more information about the school, about the programs, and about the application process. And then our job is really to guide you right up until the application point. And then once you apply, we will then kind of take a step back, and then you'll be speaking to the admissions team. The schedule for today's webinar is that I'll be giving you a brief insight into the school and the school community, and then I'll be handing over to our Career Centre, who will be giving you more of an overview into the who makes up the team and how the Career Centre is there to help support and guide you when you're on one of our programs. So just want to give you a quick overview of the program portfolio that we have here at LBS. So you can see that the programs that we have are broken up into three sections. So we've got the early career program portfolio. So this includes the Masters in Management, the Global Masters in Management, the Masters in Analytics and Management, and the Masters in Financial Analysis. So these programs are open to students with a maximum of 2 years of work experience. And you can see that the average kind of work experience is around 1 year for the early career programs, but it obviously ranges up to 2. And then for our mid-career program portfolio, we've got our MBA program, we've got the Masters in Finance full-time, and we've got the Masters in Finance part-time program. So for the MBA and the Masters in Finance full-time program, the average work experience is roughly around the 5 years mark. And then for the part-time program, it's around 7.5. And then we've also got our leadership program portfolio, which is the executive MBA. We have an EMBA in that's based in sort of the Americas and Europe. We've got EMBA Global, which is in Asia. And then we've also got our LBS Sloan in Masters in Strategy. So you can see that for most of the programs, the average is around sort of the 11-year mark. And then for our Sloan Masters in Strategy, it's around sort of the 17, 18 years mark. We also offer a range of different executive education courses. So these are much shorter programs, but they're there for individuals and for companies. And they're obviously very popular, and they're a good way of getting the kind of teaching and learning that LBS is renowned for, but in a shorter space of time. So I just wanted to kind of give you more information into the school and into the school community. So obviously we're a world-renowned business school. We're considered one of the best business schools in the world. But the kinds of things that I think sets us really apart is definitely our world-class faculty. Studied and taught in some amazing institutions across the globe, and they're really renowned for advising governments and also different institutions in and around business. And the thing that I think that we're really proud of is that our faculty are there to produce research on a regular basis. So the information and knowledge that you're gaining when you are at LBS is going to be really applicable whilst you're on the program and also post-graduation. And then the other thing I think that really stands us apart is our outstanding peer group. So I'm sure you all know that we have a very rigorous admissions process, which means that the students that are coming onto the programs are people who are super collaborative, very ambitious, very motivated, and also incredibly diverse. So most of our students, 80 to 90% of our classes are from students internationally outside of the UK. And they've also had some amazing experiences, whether that be through internships or professional work experiences or cultural experiences. So it makes for a very rich student body. There are also lots of opportunities for you to socialize and network with students within your classes, but also within the other programs. So we have shared electives, which allows you to kind of share your knowledge and gain lots of knowledge and expertise with different students, whether that be with Ember London's, for example, with 10 to 11 years of work experience, or with sort of fresh graduates who have a different perspective. And then we also have over 80 student clubs, and these are all shared across campus. So you'll be in a club, let's say the Women in Business Club, and you'll be able to interact with students from across programs and create events and network with these different individuals. So there's lots of opportunities for you to develop a network. And then our London location definitely sets us apart. So obviously London is a brilliant finance centre, it's a brilliant business hub, but it's also a melting pot of different individuals and different cultures. So you'll always feel at home in London, and also you'll never be bored. There's always something to do here, and there's definitely something for everybody. And lastly, I think our global mindset really does set us apart. So our program don't just focus on say the European markets or the Americas, but we look at business and finance holistically so that you can get a very broad and deep and rich understanding of business and finance and the way that it works. Which is obviously really important because most of our students will be working and working after graduating in somewhere. So yeah, so I think global mindset is definitely important, an important one to highlight. Brilliant. So I'm going to hand over to Richard Bland now and the LBS Career Centre to give you more information about their offering.
Hello, everyone. I live in Suffolk, and I don't know whether it was Lucky's internet or my internet that seemed to be breaking up. So please, would someone let me know if I start breaking up, and I'll probably try to get rid of my my nice spring background from London Business School. I'm not actually lying in the grass in the garden of London Business School. It's just my background isn't quite as attractive. Right, okay, I'm going to share my screen. My name is Richard Bland. I look after the finance team here. I'm going to share my, okay, host disabled participant screen sharing. Liam, can you help me? So I can share my screen, otherwise it's going to be quite a short presentation. Thank you very much. Right. Okay, so the purpose of this session is essentially to introduce you guys to the finance team, to tell us how we think we work differently from other business schools and how that sort of maybe would differentiate us from the competition. There are lots of really good business schools out there, and obviously, you can choose amongst those, and I think one of the differentiating factors is actually Career Centre's offering. And so we'll talk about that, and whilst we're talking through how Career Centre works, we'll talk about the sorts of things we do, networking opportunities, etc. How we'll therefore support you when you're here. And then we'll just have a couple of slides on investment banking and a couple of slides on private equity, because generally those two areas seem to be of most interest to the majority of students. But before we do that, I would like to know who is signed in. So we're going to run a poll if I can, and the poll is going to be polling is closed. Relaunch poll. Here we go. Right. Can everyone see that? Can people in my team give a thumbs up if they can see it? Yep. Okay. So we want to know what programs you're considering. Early careers, mid-careers, as Lucky has described, Ember, Sloan Leadership Program careers. So we have 104 people logged in, so there's really no, 103, someone just logged off. So there's really no excuse for, I mean, it's just a matter of pressing a button. And, I'm not going to hold you to task. Go on, can we get to 100? We have, so whilst we're doing that, just a housekeeping. So I'm going to introduce the team to you in a minute. But actually what will happen is we'll talk for maybe half an hour, and then we'll go to Q&A. But during the next half an hour, you can still ask questions, okay? So there's a Q&A function. You'll be able to ask questions. You'll be able to also upvote those questions. I don't know how familiar you are with Zoom, but you'll be able to upvote them so the most popular questions get the most thumbs up and they go to the top of the list. Any questions you ask during my chat, it may be that the members of my team can answer the questions for you. Okay, so if we can answer questions there and then, we will. If they're questions that deserve, maybe need me to answer rather than the others, then we'll keep those to the end, right? So we're just trying to. We know there'll be lots of questions. We're just trying to free up more time for questions. So by all means, ask questions. I'm going to end polling because 10 people haven't worked out how to use the poll, and I'm going to share the results. So just so you know, 76% of this audience is mid-careers, and chunk early careers, 17% early careers, and a small smattering of leadership programs. So yeah, I'll try to talk to everyone, but I will bear that in mind. So I'm going to stop sharing the results. I'm going to delete that. Okay. So I'd like to introduce the finance team to you. There are 4 members of the team: Alexandra, Tim, Lucy, and myself. So in that order, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and so to give them center stage. So Alexandra, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure, thanks, Richard. And thanks everyone for joining today. My name is Alexandra, and among other things, I've been doing M&A, investment banking, covering chemicals and mining clients for UBS. And here at LBS, I am looking after the sell side.
Tim?
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Mann. I joined London Business School after a long career in public equities, working as a portfolio manager here in London. So I take a special interest in my sectors, which are asset management, hedge funds, private wealth, as well as development banks. I engage with a wide spectrum of companies. There are a lot of asset management firms. Mostly I'm helping students get jobs in areas of investment research and related functions within investment companies. I look forward to seeing you. Thank you.
And last but not least, Lucy.
Everyone, I'm Lucy. I cover 3 sectors within the finance team. Those are real estate, impact investing, and commodities. That means my main responsibility is to provide students across all programs with the career opportunities from the leading and key player companies within those sectors.
Thank you very much. Thanks all. You might want to mute your mics now. And I'm Richard, and I've worked at London Business School for 10 years now. And my background is in banking. Specifically, I'm an ex-trader, so I did 22 years as a trader. The last 10 years was at Deutsche Bank, where I traded interest rate swaps, government bonds, credit, etc., etc. So since joining London Business School, I have looked after the investment banking side. I've looked after the finance team more generally. I've been head of employer engagement, and now I have a particular focus on private equity because it's one of the more interesting. All areas of finance are interesting, obviously, but it's one of the more interesting areas of finance, and it's one of the areas of finance that students are most interested in breaking into currently. Right, so thank you. I'm going to share my screen again from the beginning. Slideshow. There we go. Right, so we've done that. So what does Careers Centre's purpose? So really our purpose is to enhance the career prospects of students and alumni, and we kind of do that in a variety of ways. We spend time coaching with students. We try to provide networking opportunities, career networking opportunities. We try to provide career insights, and we work developing online resources, workshops, so to help you with your career development. And within the employer engagement team, the finance team work within the employer engagement team, and we basically we get involved in all of those, and so we engage with recruiters, with companies, to find out what they're looking for, what skills they're looking for, what opportunities there are. But also we engage with students, and we spend time coaching and advising those students. We spend time also developing those workshops, developing those online resources. So actually, when you're thinking about a business school, what business school to go to, you'll often find other career services or career centers, we like to call it, don't work that way. They'll have a recruiter-facing team that just engage with companies, and they'll have sort of coaches. And I think the model where you can be both really differentiates us, and means we're able to share our learning and talk from a position of knowledge and experience. Not that obviously career coaches can't do that, but they're offering something different, and we do have those. So I'm only really going to focus on the bottom half of that slide. So regardless of this slide, regardless of what your career trajectory is going to be, whether you're planning on making a sea change career transition, whether you just want to accelerate your career within your organization, or whether you think you're setting up your own fintech business, whatever that may be, we can help. And we've got this sort of upside down pyramid at the bottom there. And we input into creating, as I said, online career resources, and we'll have a look at what those might be. We input into skills workshops, and we give our presentations which sort of teach you about the various the various sectors that we cover. We'll also input into technical skills provision. So that might be working with clubs to, in private equity's case, to work out LBO, to provide LBO modeling sessions. And one might think that some things, not everything is necessarily taught in the classroom by faculty. So those sort of basic mechanics like LBO modeling, or stock pitch, or crack a case, etc., actually taught by us. And then, of course, last but not least, we spend time with you offering one-to-one support. So we already talked about this. Obviously, we have a jobs board, and we'll post maybe 3,000 jobs a year on that jobs board, trying to draw attention to relevant jobs rather than just trawling whatever, looking at e-financial careers. But actually, the thing I want to focus on here is is something called Canvas. So that's our online resource, and I'm going to try to share another screen because I think I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do this. Here we go. So this is just an example of what it looks like. I'm hoping everyone can still see this. So that's me again. And this is my private equity pages, but I think it's everyone will have their own sector pages. We'll have sections about current trends, explanation about career pathways, etc. Information about previous job postings, about tracks. There's and also a London Business School's private equity guide that we put together. And in that guide, you've got a guide on how to build an LBO model, both on paper and on Excel. And at the back end, there's sort of interview questions one could expect. And let's go to the end. Interview questions one could expect to get asked. Yeah. So really useful online materials. The idea being you can upskill before you even come to engage in any significant way, and certainly before you come one-to-one. I would expect you to have read through these and really familiarize yourself with the environment, so that you get the most out of a session, a one-to-one session with us. Let's go back to our presentation from the current slide. There we go. Right. So we talked about networking opportunities, and obviously our goal is to try to draw companies to London Business School, and we can draw them to London Business School to give individual presentations. We can, many of you have been to undergraduate university, all of you have been to undergraduate university, we're familiar with sort of careers fairs formats. Now, personally, I value individual company presentations, and you get a chance to hear more in depth about the company, get a chance to ask questions, get a chance to network afterwards, but not all companies are set up to be able to do that. So we have a careers fair format as well. And the most interesting one I want to draw your attention to is the buy-side networking evening, which is when we ask companies from the buy-side and alumni from the buy-side back to LBS. I think it's slated to happen, I can't remember, in February. Generally it happens in spring, but we ask them to come back, and it's a very successful evening. But we have equivalents in the fintech space, in the tech space. We have an executive search networking evening. As well. So there are lots of different ways that we draw prospective recruiters to campus. The other thing that I'm very keen on is actually getting students to go and to visit companies. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about finance treks, which happen all around the world. And focus on different things. So there are lots of treks, happen in all sorts of sectors, but I would say a significant minority, but maybe even half, are finance treks. So clearly, lots of treks happen in London. So you'll go around. So maybe 15, 20 students will go around to companies, a range of companies, over a space of a couple of days, and get presented on those companies in their offices. And that might be in a number of subsectors. So in London, there'll be an asset management track. Typically, there'll be obviously private equity one, real estate, and there'll be sector or regionally focused tracks as well. There's an Africa PE track, and there's often an infrastructure track as well. And then there'll be tracks around the globe. Typically, people from those countries, but not always. It depends on whether they sort of are overtly recruitment focused or more educational. They happen various times of the year, from October through to Easter, and I've tried to sort of write down, just to give tasters of the sorts of companies that we have visited in the past. There were too much to write on Hong Kong and China, but typically there's a private equity. There have been asset management tracks and investment banking tracks in the past to Hong Kong. So, we all have pages like this. So here's a range of companies that engage with London Business School and recruit from London Business School. Obviously, it's not a complete list. You might want to look at the employment reports from the programs that you're interested in, because you'll find information about where students have gone. But we just thought we'd give you a taster, picking out asset management, private equity. The finance team actually focus on very specific things. So we don't actually look after fintech. So that's looked after by another team, but it doesn't change the fact that fintech companies like Revolut and Visa, who decide to call themselves fintech, do recruit from London Business School. And then you've got sort of the odd finance program within large corporates. So Siemens, for example, on the far left of your page, do run a finance program. A little bit of VC in there as well, Hamburg Perks, and impact investing with Big Society Capital. So I think that gives you a flavor of the sorts of companies that engage with London Business School, or we engage with. So a word about investment banking. I think in the interest of time, Alexandra, I was going to ask Alexandra to talk through it, but I think I'm going to cover it, and we've got two slides. I'm probably going to focus on just on this one slide. So the first thing to note is that if you're an early career student or a mid-career student, then then the route in is via an analyst internship or associate internship program. A lot of people, if I look at the amount of people who go into start their finance careers post London Business School, I would say if you combine both early careers and mid careers, then I would say that over about 50% of the students who go into finance will start their careers in investment banking. Part of the reason for that is it's a good springboard into other careers within finance, whether that's private equity, hedge funds, being CEO, etc. So we'll probably leave this slide and maybe come back to it, but there are some things that we can reference later in the Q&A. So how are we doing for time? Good. Okay. So one of the areas that students seem to be most interested in within finance. I'm really sorry about this, but I'm in the middle of my my daughter's behind me, and I need to ask her to close the door. Hold on. Sorry. Right. So so a word on private equity. Just very briefly. Private equities and VC is a continuum. The reason we've got these companies on this deck is all these companies have alumni who've worked at alumni from London Business School who now work at these companies. But essentially, it's a continuum. At the low end of early stage investment end, obviously that's venture capital, and as a company grows and starts having starts going to profitability, then we start talking about sort of growth equity and mid-market firms, and then the famous firms that we all know about in large cap buyouts, KKRs and Blackstones. And within that mid-market space, you'll get companies that focus on specific subsectors. So you might get companies that focus. Actis, for example, focuses on emerging markets. Alchemy focuses on distressed and turnarounds, and Bridgepoint focuses on investing in Europe. So a lot of people think they know about private equity, but I'm going to give you a 2-minute guide to how private equity works. So here's a pot of gold. How it works typically, what will happen is that you'll have a bunch of investors. So there may be pension funds, there may be sovereign wealth funds, there may be endowments, ultra high net worth individuals will invest their money with a private equity fund, and those the people who run that fund will be called general partners. Typically, they will have it'll be a specific fund set up for a finite period, most typically 10 years. So they'll part their money with that fund and say, please invest that fund, buy some companies for us. So during that process, they will take advice, the investors take advice on which funds to invest in, and they'll look at performance, etc. And there are placement agents that oversee that process. When it comes to the process of buying the funds, investing the money that's been invested, then the general partner of the private equity fund will be taking advice, obviously from accountants for their due diligence, from investment banks for M&A targets, from lenders, because obviously the way that private equity makes a significant chunk of its money is because it's a leveraged investment. So they'll maybe put down a proportion, let's say 40% in equity, and borrow 60% off the back of the future income of the company, and therefore providing that leverage is very important. They'll use consultants to look at the commercial due diligence and try to sense check the investment strategy, and obviously lawyers to tie it all up. Once they bought the company, the idea is that you're going to be adding value. That will be changing the company, changing its, tweaking its strategy. Maybe that strategy might be expanding into other markets. It may be bolting on other businesses to shift the company's focus. It might be increasing product lines. It might just be reducing or improving margins, increasing sales, reducing costs, etc. The idea would be typically after a 5-year hold, you'd sell that company, you would return the money to the investors after 10 years, and the investor will be so pleased that they'll go, that's fantastic, can we do it all over again? So I'm going to ask another question. So obviously we've just dealt with this already. The private equity deal's got 4 stages, and those stages are origination, execution, management or strategy, and an exit. And there's an explanation of what each is, but I think I've explained that in the previous slide. So your question, if I can get that second poll going, let's have a look at the second poll. There we go. Is, in your opinion, which of those 4 is the most important? Which of those 4, origination, execution, management, exit, in your opinion, is the most important element of the private equity deal? So I won't take it long because we're past 12:30 already. We have 50. Don't worry, I won't call you out and ask necessarily. Okay, that's really, I'm gonna end the polling, right? Okay, and I'm gonna share the results. So it's really, well, I think quite interesting. We got 17% think origination is the most important, 31% execution, about the same management, and about 20% exit. That's really, very interesting, fairly common. Actually, once students join London Business School, they tend to say that management's by far the most important element, and why wouldn't they? Because the strategy is possibly the most interesting part of the investment process to many. I would actually say that origination is the most important, but they're all hugely important. And the reason I think origination is important is because what you want to do is to buy, I mean, I guess it depends what your strategy is, but what you want to do is to buy the best possible company led by the best possible management team, because that's going to give you the best possible chance of success. So you're kind of riding a wave. You're trying to buy the market leader or the number 2 in a market. Now, as I say, if you're doing turnaround, that's a different matter. But I think you buy something good, and that takes really tough to identify something and then bid for that and win the bid. And that takes building relationships, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of hard work to get someone to trust you. And I think that's personally, and therefore origination is crucial, because you buy something that's not good. Yes, you can try to muck around with it, but it might stay not good. Next slide. Okay, so last slide, and then we can go to Q&A. The last slide is Wagamama. So that's Alan Yao at the bottom there, who actually set up a restaurant in London in early 90s called Hakkasan, and I think they're now global, but also he set up a chain, Wagamama, which I guess most of you or many of you are familiar with. And the reason I've done this is just to show the progress. It's not all about one company, one private equity company investing and then floating. Actually, we've got 3 private equity companies who invested in Wagamama as the company grew. Graphite Capital, we've got a couple of alums at Graphite Capital, invested right at the get-go when they were just in London, and they expanded with Graphite's help. They expanded nationally. Lion Capital, then they sold their stake about 9 years later to Lion Capital, who then continued that progress. And again, 6 years later, they sold to Duke Street, who then internationalized it. And 7 years later, they sold to the Restaurant Group, which often is the end holder of once private equity have added value and extracted value. They sold to a strategic, the Restaurant Group, who I think unfortunately are finding it a challenge for obvious reasons with COVID. So that is the end of our very brief discussion of what we offer at London Business School. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and hopefully we're going to go to some Q&A. So some people have used Q&A function, and some people use the chat function. So some questions have been answered. How are we going to do this, guys? I can just go for the most commonly so could you throw some light about private equity recruitment at London Business School? So it says Alexandra would like to answer this question live.
No.
No, I know. No, fine. Good. Okay. So I'm going to answer that question. If we think of the companies that come to London Business School for mass recruitment, private equity is not a mass recruitment, generally not a mass recruitment hiring process. So by mass recruitment, I mean hiring sort of multiple people, 5, 6, 7 people a year. Investment banking does that. So when you look at the employment reports, you'll see that you'll find one person going to each private equity company. And I think that's worth you bearing in mind. So it tends to be, yes, there are companies that actively come on campus and actively engage with us and recruit into programs, but actually there are less than you would think. And it's important that you are seen as a that it's your search as well as our search, and that you're an individual. They're looking for one person rather than multiple people. So when I always do this presentation at the beginning of the year, there are 600 people who work at KKR, investment professionals working KKR globally. There are 10,000 people who work at JP Morgan in London. So I think it's worth you sort of bearing that in mind. So that's that answer. What else? What other questions do we have? For an MBA considering, sorry, I don't want to nab all of these, but I'm for an MBA considering PE, what are the main skills one needs to demonstrate? It's possible a realistic shot at PE without prior banking experience. Absolutely, it's possible for consultants absolutely to break into PE. I think the skills you need to demonstrate is a good understanding of finance and modeling, etc. Because if you think of the skills that you need in private equity, you need the sorts of strategic skills that you'll learn from consulting, but you'll also need to be able to value a company and understand the financial levers that are at your disposal. And I think therefore, and we can help with this. Obviously, you can do a lot of have a lot of support on gaining those technical skills whilst you're here. But I would say that that's really important. So because there will be other consultants who've taken the time. And if there's something you can do before you come to London Business School, then start that process. The earlier you start that process, the better. How does the school assist students interested in pursuing private equity in Asia? I think we've answered that already. We do treks in Singapore. We do treks in China and Hong Kong. I'd love to do a trek in India as well. We've done one before, but it takes people to put themselves forward to lead those tracks. So we work very closely with clubs when we're arranging the club. So the PVC club, we'll work very closely with them to that they'll sponsor, and so we'll Career Centre sponsor those tracks. What else? I'm going to say this is a question for either Tim or Alexandra. Is it worth taking a CFA before applying to PE and IB?
IB, no. Sorry.
Yeah. What about asset management, Tim? CFA useful?
Yeah, well, I tend to find for asset management that of the people who are being interviewed or getting traction with recruiters, some of them will have a CFA and some not, and the split is actually about 50-50, so it doesn't seem to make a lot of difference in terms of having conversations or even in the end result. It's really about your preparation, how you present, and your real interest in an asset management role. So it doesn't make a lot of difference. Some like it, but most are just see you as a talented individual.
Thank you, Tim. A question for Lucy. You okay to answer a question, Lucy? Can you give an overview of impact investment recruitment market in London?
Yeah, of course. So currently there's a high demand for impact investing at the moment, given the current climate. Impact investing, as Richard was saying, with the difference with private equity, it's not a structured process. They're not going to be, each firm isn't going to be taking 5-10 students. It's more 1 or 2. And in terms of, I think there was skills in that question as well. Was that right? It's gone green. In terms of skills for impact investing, you do have to understand the investing side. You do have to have the understanding of finance and how to model, but you also really need to show your motivation of why impact, because that's there are some misconstrued ideas about what impact investing actually is. So really understanding what it is when you're having an interview with someone is key, and it's the main skill to have.
Good, thank you, Lucy. Okay, so look, what I'm going to do is, by all means, you can upvote these questions, but what I want to do is to try to ask you to urge you to ask more general questions rather than specific questions about your own, because it won't be, I mean, it'll be of interest to you, but not of interest to the general audience. So just try to bear that in mind when you're asking a question, because I'm going to just ignore those questions which are really specific. So we've done that one already. I haven't worked out how to delete questions, unfortunately. What activities while at business school would best strengthen my ability to transition into UK PE? So we've sort of, we sort of touched on this, but there's there's 2 different ways. If your long-term goal, and I guess it depends what stage one is in a career, and obviously I don't know the answer to that, but I would say that if you're an early career student, it absolutely pays to start your career in investment banking, consulting, or similar. And the reason for that is the very few jobs are actually for early career students, so analyst level students, very few jobs in private equity straight out of undergraduate or straight out of with pre-experience. And what they tend to do is to try to cherry pick from the people who've been trained by ideally a top tier strategy consultant or investment bank. So I would definitely tell you to urge you to think about that. Not everyone's happy to do that, but it does increase your chances. Having said that, each country has its own idiosyncrasies. So there are plenty of people, if you have a look in mid-market UK PE funds who come from a Big Four background. Maybe you worked in transaction services or corporate finance within PwC, EY, etc. So plenty of people who have that kind of background. So I think it's case by case. But whilst you're at business school, obviously you'll take the PE courses and and you'll build yourself. But to me, one of the most important things is what you do yourself, how you network and how you identify the people who are most likely to be able to help you. And we can help with that in terms of helping you connect to alumni. But actually, we're helping everybody, and I think one has to go beyond that. So when you're thinking about your network, just obviously the LBS alumni are hugely important, but look beyond that. Look for your family, friends, former business colleagues as well, because that's your environment. They're going to assist you in your search. So what else do we have? Could you go back to IB slides and elaborate more on IB? Yes, we could. Alexandra, are you happy to do that?
Yeah, sure.
If I share my slide, your slide even, because it is yours. Let me just share. Let me just minimize that. So do you want that one, or do you want this one, or both?
No, just let's leave this one, because that's more about how we get into it, and I think that's what people are interested in. So look, it is a very that's a lot of words and in small fonts, so I'm not going to go into all of it, but a couple of things to note, both on analyst level and associate level. We are mostly talking about structured recruitment via an internship, because for both cohorts, that is becoming a primary way of getting into investment banking. On analyst level, there are still options to get into a full-time role after graduating, especially since if you have any previous investment banking internships. However, on associate side, on mid-career side, that's becoming much less common. There are definitely, it's something that you would only find if you have some relevant experience, and you would pretty much have to search for those roles individually. Couple of things that I'd like to point out is, of course, the international recruitment happens a bit earlier than EMEA recruitment. So if you're interested in roles in Hong Kong or US, especially in the US, networking is paramount. It's absolutely critical to securing a role. So probably even before arriving on campus in London, it would be quite helpful to get in touch with banks and alums who are currently in New York. Another thing is, despite the competition from tech, diversified consulting, etc., banking remains quite competitive. So it is, and for our MBA students, it only happens once, right? So for mid-career students, it's pretty much in your first year, and structured recruitment either happens or it doesn't. Unlike consulting, where the firms do come back on campus in the second year for full-time hiring. So it is much your first term is quite intense, but there is a lot of support from Career Center in terms of coaches, myself, and also our excellent peer leaders. And peer leaders are our second year students who are trained and are willing to help share their experience in particular sectors, to both give you interview feedback, maybe technical prep as well, look through your CVs, etc. So their help is immense, because they've just been through it themselves, and mostly successfully. And then, of course, you have technical training, and that helps create this winning proposition of combining the hard skills, so finance, technical skills, and soft skills, which is your story and what is the best way of pitching yourself to the prospective employer. And I cannot assign weights to either of those. They're equally important. And we find that it is incredibly important to run your story past other people, to get into a habit of telling it and fine tune it. So this is where we've seen a huge improvement. I've personally seen a huge improvement with students coming in September and hearing their stories afterwards in October, November, and seeing them perform in interviews later on in January. So I think I would say that's the most important. Once Richard tried to show you Canvas, so once you become a student, you have access to Canvas, and in exploring sectors pages, you will have investment banking pages. You will have the investment banking guide that was written by previous students, and I've updated it since with samples of previous interviews, etc. And you will have timelines, much more detailed than here, which will show you pretty much by months what you're supposed to be doing. For early careers, it's of course even more condensed, more intense, but we will be talking about that to our early career students who are starting the program this year. I am giving a webinar on exploring careers in investment banking, where we're going to talk in much more detail about everything investment banking related on the 13th of July. For mid-careers, similar webinar, we're going to be doing that at end of August, beginning of September. I don't think I've seen the date yet confirmed.
Thank you, Alexandra.
The rest of the questions.
I just need to do, hold on. I would say that to Alexandra's point, that we got, she talked about the investment banking guide. I showed you the PE guide. There's an asset management one, there's a real estate one, etc., etc. I think these are very valuable tools. I'm playing for time because I seem to have lost my, here we go. Right, I just wanted to draw your attention to this slide, which for some reason, share screen. Sorry, right. Right, is that sharing now? For some reason, I missed this slide. I'll leave it like this because each time I do it, I think it's on animation. Maybe it's not. Here we go. There. I slipped through this slide. So, we're one of three, in terms of when you think of the one-to-one support you can have. Alexandra's already talked to peer leaders. We're one of three lots of people you can see. So for more generalist questions in terms of support, what sort of, if you're an MBA and obviously you guys and girls who've been on this call, I think you're interested in finance, and that's great. But for many people, an MBA particularly is a journey, and there are many options, and about working out what those what would be the best options, and how to navigate that is an important part of the first term. To Alexandra's point, actually, it's surprisingly soon, if you do decide to go down sort of structured recruitment processes, it's surprisingly soon that you have to make those sort of decisions. Because certainly for investment banking, once you've made that decision, there's not a second chance, generally, because the hiring through internship is important. You know that. So the more people you talk to about what career, early on, what career you want to pursue, the better. So generalist coaches can help with, helping you define what career you want to pursue, and preparing an action plan, helping with your CV, etc. And then the sector leads are there with our specialist knowledge about the specific area. So the idea is we're sort of, you're being funneled. Hopefully you'll see career coaches first, you might see peer leaders first to get an idea, and then you'll get the most out of the time you spend with us, and we'll be able to help you most effectively, because you already will be well informed and you'll know what you want to get out of the time we have together. Right. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and to Q&A again. So we've answered that question. Throw some light about private equity recruitment. I'm going to miss the international student from East Africa. Sorry about that. But what I would say, you need to go through investment banking to break into PE. Worked in VC, I guess it depends what sort of. I think it depends on the specific VC experience. So unfortunately, I won't be able to answer that question. Fintech industry massively hiring. Yeah, fintech is a good hire. Again, have a look at the employment reports. Fintech is a good hire of students currently, whereas tech in general is a strong hire of students, and that's as much students' interest as as availability of jobs. So, what are the exits from a consulting background? Raghav, I'm not really sure what you mean there. Exits from consulting background into finance. I guess once again, it depends on the sort of consulting background, and depends on so a number of factors, but essentially with the consulting background, many options are open to you. We see consultants go into investment banking, into private equity, into asset management, into real estate, etc. I see private equity and venture capital, real estate, finance, tort and corporate finance concentration route. I shouldn't be reading out these questions because I don't really necessarily understand them. Yes, if you're taking a corporate finance concentration route within one of your programs, then obviously it gives you the option to focus on specific electives, and that's a good thing. I would say that sometimes your electives happen later in the process, so bear that in mind, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't arm yourself with the skills that you need beforehand as well. Do MBA candidates go into finance careers post MBA come from a finance background? I would say, Alexandra, actually, I'm going to put you on the spot there. So think about investment banking, roughly. So let's say, post MBA, what sort of proportion of people would not have a finance background?
Quite high proportion of people, and I think I've answered a similar question.
Have you answered that already? Okay.
That especially in London, having a finance background is really not a prerequisite, and banks actively seek to diversify the backgrounds of students who come into their programs. So it's there is a significant proportion of the summer associate class who don't have finance background.
Yeah, fine.
Doesn't mean that they didn't prepare though for the technical questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we're running out of time.
Here we go. I think we're running out of time. We've got one last question. Strong background in accounting, working industries, like switching to IB. What a typical position MIF graduates get hired with less or no experience in financial services. I'm going to answer that question. So when students come to when investment banks come to London Business School, they come with an idea to recruit into one of those programs. When they come on campus, they come with an idea to recruit into an analyst or an associate program. And there'll be people who choose to go down that associate path with 7, 8, 9 years work experience. And equally, there'll be people who've got sort of maybe only 3 years work experience who go down that path as well. So that doesn't, so it's quite rare that people make a step above. If you haven't, if you haven't worked as an associate with an investment bank, it's quite rare that someone gets to leap above and go in at VP level. Okay, look, we're going to have to stop it there because we've got a hard stop at 1 o'clock. Thank you very much for your time. I hope this has given you some flavor of what our capabilities are, and hopefully given you a clearer idea whether you want or indeed don't want to come to London Business School now you've heard us speak. But we'd love to see you, and if you have any follow-up questions, by all means, you can send them to Lucky. Right, with that, I'm going to leave you. Lucky, do you want to say any final word?
Yes, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, our wonderful Career Centre, for joining us. It was really great to hear from you guys. And thank you guys for tuning in. Again, as Richard mentioned, please send us any follow-up questions that you have to masters@london.edu, and we'll be more than happy to try and answer your questions.
So I just have one final question. After this, you might try to send me a LinkedIn message. and that's fine. But just don't be offended. I won't link in to any prospective student. It's just a policy I have, and I think everyone works their own way, but I won't. So don't be offended if you don't hear back. Great. Okay. Well, have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.